Welcome in, everyone. You're listening to Bulls Central. I'm joined with me today by a special guest who has been kind enough to take time out of his day to meet with me. He's had a very illustrious career in the field of broadcasting, doing play-by-play for a host of teams, really, both for collegiate and professional. He's hosted a number of different sports talk shows in his career. Author of this book right here, always a pleasure, and a Chicagoland Hall of Famer. And you know him as the Bulls radio play-by-play announcer. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the show, Chuck Swirsky. Chuck, always great to have you on and appreciate you making the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now, be sure to give Chuck a follow at CTS Bulls on Twitter. Check out his book as well. Always a pleasure. It's a really great read. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Now, Chuck, when I saw you, not had you on, when I saw you at the United Center when the Bulls were taking on the Lakers, it was a bit uncertain at that time whether the Bulls would make the playoffs. And I asked you at that time if you thought they would make it. And you said yes, which I always love your optimism. They ended up not making the playoffs. Although coming very close, right, by way of the play-in. In your view, what do the Bulls need to do to ensure that they are getting back to being competitive and ensuring that they get to the playoffs in this upcoming season? And I know the offseason is not over yet, but based on what they've done so far, do you feel that they're making strides in the right direction to fix some of the weaknesses in the roster?
Well, that's a two-part question. First, we'll deal with the structure of the ball club, because I think there's a misconception out there that, the Bulls defense, how come they can't play defense? Well, the Bulls actually were a really good defensive team.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there in black and white, and it's also optically where you can say, you know what, this team did play much better defense. The concepts that they incorporated in 22-23 paid dividends. Okay, so, I mean, as far as on the ball defense, you could probably break down every NBA team and say, that guy really struggles when he's defending that player, or this guy really can't defend at all. He doesn't know how to play the angles. The truth of the matter is, and this is the truth in the NBA, trying to stop a very accelerated, gifted player with a huge upside who can get the ball, handle the ball, have great footwork is really hard to stop one-on-one in this league. Okay, the players are too good. So then they say, okay, what's your definition of defense in today's NBA? And I don't want to deviate from your question. I'm just saying about defense with the Bulls. Yeah. Today in the NBA, with the way the game is being called, personally, I would like to see the physicality return to a point, but that's just my opinion.
Sure.
But the way the game is played today, okay, it's very difficult to guard one-on-one talent.
Sure.
And so when you run packages, a lot of pick and rolls, then it comes down to, are you willing to say to yourself as a player, a defensive player, I'm buying into this defensive concept, and I've got to make at least one initial stop. So if I get beat off the dribble, I'm going to have weak side help or something of that ilk. So the Bulls did accomplish that in 22-23. The issue, again, is three-point shooting.
Yeah.
And every team in the league wants it. Very few teams right now in the NBA have a solid enough depth on their roster where they can just throw out three-point shooters, boom, 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 not only as starters, but coming off the bench. If you have a plethora of three-point shooters in today's game, three-point shooters who, by the way, can make three-point shots, because, it's one thing to say, great, we had a three-point shooter, but if they're shooting 32%, really? So, I mean, in this league, if you can shoot, in my opinion, 36% or better of threes, you got to take that into consideration. Everyone wants to shoot 40%. I get that. It's hard to shoot 40% three-pointers in the NBA. Yeah. So, I mean, Can you get 40 to 50% shooters? Ideally, you'd like it. But I'll start with 36, 37% shooters and go from there. The Bulls don't take a lot of threes. And the reason they don't take a lot of threes is because they don't have a lot of three-point shooters. That shot just does not fall into the game plan, the script of Bulls basketball. That's going to change this year. And the reason why it's going to change is the additions of Carter and Craig. And I think Dalen Terry is a work in progress. Yeah. And we'll see where that goes. But I think for now, if someone says, will the Bulls be a better three-point shooting team? Will they take more three-pointers with Lavine and Williams? And now the addition of Carter and Craig, I would say yes.
And
does
so
that make sense where I'm coming from?
No, it totally does. And I think also the re-signing of Coby White as well. He's one of the few, three-point shooters that could take it at high volume and was actually a threat from that line, from three-point line as well. I think a lot of us fans, we have various takes and thoughts on, what were the Bulls? Why did they struggle last season? Whether it be, like you said, lack of shooting, limited rim protection, not getting enough second chance points because of poor offensive rebounding, or just the overall team chemistry or identity of the team not really being there on most nights. I think that's the question I have for you is, you literally saw every single possession of every game. Now, even some of the biggest diehard fans are able to do that. In your view, what was the single biggest issue from this past season that really set the Bulls back? Was it the three-point shooting, or do you think it was maybe
Well, I think three-point shooting was a part of it, not all of it. I think the inconsistency really, it would drive me crazy. Yeah. Because I would see them play at a high level one night, and then the next night, they're just trying to labor through to the fourth quarter to get into a position to win a game. And then there were other games where you say to yourself, like, I don't get it. I don't understand how this club, one moment to the next. They're giving up big leads. And I'll say this for big leads. Okay, I know the Bulls had issues like a lot of teams do. One thing I hope people realize, that leads in the NBA, they can disappear in moments. Yeah. And these players, again, I come back to players. This league is so good that a league can dissipate within a minute or two, where you're in double digits and you're saying to yourself, hey, this is pretty good. Well, this is in college, where if there's a discrepancy amongst talent, and that's why you see a lot of college teams who don't have the skilled players eat as much shot clock possessions as they can when they're up against really good teams, because they can't outscore them. Right. Where in the NBA, you hit some threes and boom, and all of a sudden a 15-point lead with 3:30 to go is down to 6. And you're saying to yourself, oh my gosh, we're in a game. But the thing with the Bulls is they cannot squander these leads against teams that they should beat. And that's not to disrespect teams, but it was happening on not a regular basis, but just enough to say to yourself, this got to stop, because those wins that should have been in the win column, those games, you take about 5 or 6 games, maybe 7 games, and you say to yourself, you put those 7 games in the win column, the Bulls aren't having to deal with a play-in game.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I made a video on this recently, and I can't remember the specific number. I think it was 17. I went through the schedule and looked. There were 17 games the Bulls lost by 5 points or less. And I think it was 8 or 9 that was, between one possession. You talk about three-point shooting. That's the difference maker right there, right? If they took a few more three-point shots, that could potentially put them in the win column, which, like you said, you're talking about 17 games. Obviously, they're not going to win all of them, but if they win a handful of those, they're not going to be in a position where they need to be for the play.
Yes. It's interesting because Bill Winnington and I have had many discussions on the air because when you get a box score sheet, okay, you get a box score. At the end of the game, what's the first stat you look at?
Yeah, usually 3-point shooting nowadays.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because if you get outscored, let's say 33-9, 33 to 21 or whatever the case may be, and you say to yourself, oh my gosh, I mean, look at that differential. Well, I mean, I'm not an analytics whiz, and I've got my own opinions about analytics,
Right.
but 3 is better than 2.
Yeah.
And the other stat, by the way, I look at is turnovers, because I think turnovers just will kill you, because it gives the other team not only another possession, but an opportunity to hurt you by not only coming up with a steal and a turnover, but also it could lead to points. But I just think that, 3-point shooting is at a premium now.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, this next wave of kids that are coming into the draft that right now either in college or in the G League or in high school, these kids are being taught now 3-point, 3-point, 3-point. And as somebody who lived in different eras of basketball,
Right.
the 3-point shot wasn't even in the NBA. It didn't come in until 76, 77. And that's because the merger with the ABA, who I huge fan of the ABA, the old ABA, loved the ABA. But the 3-point shot has changed dramatically the way we look at a basketball game. Some people feel that it's gone to the other side. Way too much 3-point shooting, way too much taking away the creativity of a player's skill set, where we just get the ball, let's run a high screen, let's dribble drive, penetrate, find somebody in the corner, boom. Let's do a high screen, pull up jumper, topside 3, catch and shoot 3. Well, I've got my own opinions about the game and where it's at, but I'll just leave it at this. If you expect to be a really, really good team in the NBA, you've got to have a 3-point shot, variety of players who can do this, and you also have to really play tough defense, where you can get a team deep into the clock, where then they're doing a semi-anxiety attack on the floor, saying, okay, like, they took away this package, they took away that package. What are we doing? If you can get your defensive set and schematic in play, you're good.
Well, and based on what you're saying, then the Bulls had a pretty good offseason, right? If you're talking about,
I think
tough,
so. Here's the
tough.
thing: is it really going to move the needle where you say boom, boom? Well, it depends on how you describe the needle. In my opinion, if you add plus players to your team, that's moving the needle. And Javon Carter is a plus player. I remember him at West Virginia. I think he just needed to find his right spot, which he did at Milwaukee. And he is a plus player. Torrey Craig, big Torrey Craig fan. You talk to any of his coaches, they love him. And so he's a 3 and D player. Really good wing defender, can shoot the 3. So those are 2+ players. Now we have to have, as a Bulls fan, and I'm a Bulls fan, but you have to have Patrick Williams take the next step. He has to get away from the 10-4, and he's got to increase that in both areas, because he is gifted athletically beyond belief. Unbelievable. So the Bulls need that, and they have to have somebody, maybe it's a Terry, to come out of nowhere and make a statement.
And, the offseason, like I said, isn't over yet. The Bulls, as of right now, I believe they still have 2 roster spots open. Well, 3 really, if you don't include Io, who we still haven't received word on. There's any offer sheets that he's received outside of the Bulls qualifying offer. I know you can't comment on Io, given he's still a restricted free agent. Bulls, like I said, extended qualifying offer. But for the remaining free agents on the market, who would you like to see the Bulls go after to fill out those 2 remaining spots?
Well, again, it depends at this point in time, because there are a lot of moving pieces here. We're dealing with a lot of things that are going on, and I think a lot depends, quite honestly, on what happens to Lillard and what happens to Harden.
Right.
And I'll say this. I think we're already mid-July. The NBA schedule usually is released the second week in August.
Mm-hmm.
I think the networks are waiting to see where Lillard and Harden are going.
Yeah.
This is just my speculation. It wouldn't surprise me if the schedule got delayed, because
Yeah.
if Lillard leaves Portland and he winds up with Miami, I think Miami's going to get enough nationally televised games. But if Lillard goes there, they're really going to be on national TV. And I'll say this for Portland, and I'm a huge Lillard fan. I love him off the court, on the court, everything. But this is a huge critical move for Portland's franchise.
Yeah.
Because this is going to determine their next chapter in franchise history.
Mm-hmm.
And not only dealing Lillard, but also what they receive in return. And you just can't have a franchise player leave for the sake of leaving to move and shuffle the deck of chairs. Yeah. You can't do that. I was in Toronto when Vince Carter got traded. Now, when Carter was traded, he was having a lot of these injuries that just were nagging, with the knee and whatnot. And his value at that time of the trade wasn't like Lillard, where Lillard is in his prime. Right. And really, really good. Carter bounced around a little bit, and then started finding his niche as a really good player. And after the trade, he had some really good seasons, obviously, with the Nets, and then moved around, but he still played 20 plus years in the league. I think Lillard right now is at his prime. He's been banged up a little bit, but I think his value is huge. And so if there is a third team out there, or a fourth team that's going to get involved in this deal, where Lillard eventually does wind up in Miami, I think that's going to affect the free agent market. And the same thing with Harden.
And so how do you think it'll impact it, at least for the Bulls anyway?
Well, because number one, we don't know. Maybe the Bulls will get
be a part of the trade.
Yeah, we don't know that. I mean, so a lot of these things are just unknown at this point in time. And we don't know. I mean, every week we're seeing a team do this. Well, I'm going to trade you 3 second-round picks for a first-round pick in 2026, because they're already planning. These teams like Phoenix are planning ahead, and they're looking at the new CBA with this cap.
Yeah.
So the last thing they want is a guaranteed first-round pick.
Yeah.
So that's going to be money on that cap, where they're trying to say, okay, like, we don't have a first-round pick in 26, so I can make a trade right now for a player that's under contract in 26, 27, and I don't have to pay what's going to probably be a slot of $3 million, $3.5 million. So that's off the books. And I can bring in a player who will have that $3.5 million, $4 million hit and not worry about it.
Yeah. Now, obviously based on the moves the Bulls have made thus far, re-signing Vucevic, re-signing Coby White, like we mentioned, signing veteran players, Javon Carter, Torrey Craig, it's clear the front office is going to be running things back. And a lot of fans, even some folks in the media, wanted the Bulls to blow up the roster, start fresh, get as many assets that they can from young players to draft capital, and just start rebuilding. What do you say to those fans who are kind of hoping for a teardown this offseason?
Well, I number one, if that's what you want, you better have a lot of patience. Now, I get where the fans are coming from, because a 40-win team of the NBA, I mean, you're stuck. And unless a guy comes out of nowhere and becomes that piece to get you from a play-in game to 6, 5, 4 in the Eastern Conference. And, is that player on the Bulls? And if there's a player on the Bulls, it could be a Patrick Williams who elevates his game. Mm-hmm. I think Dalen Terry is still young. I mean, we have to keep in mind he hardly played his rookie year. Right. So we don't really know what is in his bag, so to speak. I mean, we know that he hustles and he's enthusiastic, and he competes and he plays hard, but I haven't seen enough of him to form an opinion on his game.
Yeah.
So, the same thing can be said of Coby White as far as, will he go from here to here? What is his upside? Where is his ceiling, so to speak?
Right.
So all these things come into play, but I would tell the fans that, I think the front office is going to let this ride out for one more year. And then I think, depending on where this club is at the end of the 23-24 season, they'll have a better big picture view of where to go in 24. But as long as you have DeRozan on the team and Lavine and now re-signing Vooch, I mean, those are three really good NBA players, really good NBA players. And I think people have to realize that, as much as I want this team in the Eastern Conference Finals, the truth of the matter is there are about 4 or 5 teams that are ahead of them personnel-wise. And does that mean that you just throw up your hands and say, we're going to blow it up? No. That you've got to add these pieces like a Carter and a Craig, and then you go from there. I mean, one player we haven't really talked about is Drummond. And, he picked up. I'll tell you what, I'm a huge Drummond fan.
Yeah.
And, I wish he would have played more, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree.
And I know he's not, the analytics today's.
Yeah. He's the traditional big man of the 90s.
Yeah, but you know what? Somebody on a team has to rebound the ball. Like the guy is a rebounding machine.
Yeah.
If you look at the last 10 years of NBA players who have rebounded the ball on an average basis, considering the amount of time he's played over the last couple, 3 years where he's been really a bench player.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is, when he's on the floor, he just gobbles up rebounds.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, his rebounding rate is leaps and bounds better when, like you said, when you factor in, minutes played, better than anybody in the league. And I think, because a lot of people say, oh, well, you have Vucevic, who is an excellent rebounder, but what Drummond excels at is on the offensive glass, which the Bulls, so many missed, second chance points, second chance opportunities last season. They were one of the worst offensive rebounding teams in the league. Yeah, you need a player like Drummond to be able to do that.
Yes.
So if I'm reading correctly what you're saying, because that was kind of going to be my next question is, at what point do the Bulls say, okay, this probably isn't going to work. We need to shake things up and we need to, readjust the roster or, tear it all down like we were talking about. So you're saying by the end of next season, if we're kind of still in the same sort of place, finishing at or, below 500, missing the playoffs, then is it time to blow things up?
Okay, so let me ask you a question. I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
What is your definition of blow up?
I mean, I think a blow up is you getting rid of the big three. Lavine, Vucevic, DeRozan. Any assets that probably would not be seen as a long-term fit on the team. That could potentially even include Caruso, or I guess really blowing it up in terms of maximizing value that you can get, for the highest value trade players that you have. That's how I would look at it.
Okay. So, and again, you have to look at the performance of players. Number one, you have to look at the cap, and you've got to find out that, okay, this obviously we've got to maximize this. The issue is this. It's one thing. I mean, when you see what Rudy Gobert in Utah, Donovan Mitchell, Utah. I mean, those are rare commodities where there was a want and need from a specific team.
Yeah.
If you put Rudy Gobert on the market today, I guarantee you Minnesota would not get the same package.
Oh, not at all. Yeah.
Okay. And you could probably say the same thing for Donovan Mitchell, as much as, because, he's going to be a free agent, I believe, in 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And, he obviously wanted to go to New York. I think that's pretty clear. And and he said all the right things in Cleveland. And I think the Cavaliers have embraced him, and he's embraced the Cavaliers. But I also think down the road, they probably are saying to themselves, okay, like, is he going to play this thing out and go to New York, or, will he re-sign here? And I mean, they've got to figure some things out with the cap too, because Mobley is a couple seasons away from getting max money.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's why there, are so many rumors out there regarding players, because the new CBA with that second apron is going to, if I'm a GM, I can't make mistakes on big contracts.
Yeah.
Where before, if you signed a guy and it just didn't materialize, you say to yourself, okay, we got, we're in the second year of a 5-year deal or second year of a 4-year deal. I'm going to have to bite the bullet. Well, if you make a mistake in another big contract, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you might not be able to get the mid-level exception if you're going over that, second tax apron, the luxury tax. But I was going to ask you this, and I think I probably know the answer, based on this upcoming season. Who will it be the most important for in terms of their future, whether it be from a contract
Patrick
perspective?
Williams.
Yeah.
This is
I had a feeling it was going to be Patrick Williams.
This is all about Patrick Williams.
Yeah.
Seriously. I mean, the thing is, he's an outstanding person. He's got a wonderful heart. He's really, really nice kid, and he still is a kid. But now, the honeymoon's over.
Yeah.
And I think we saw some growth in Williams last year. And now that growth, he's got to multiply it now. And he has to take what he learned last year. He's got to stay healthy first and foremost, which he did, last season, which was awesome. And so now with his sustainability on the floor, now he's got to take that skill set and get it done.
Yeah.
And I'm not only talking about stat wise, but I'm talking about the consistency of every game.
Yeah. Being aggressive every game. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, rebound the ball, block shots, score.
Cut to the basket.
Get to the basket. Start shooting free throws.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And I think a lot of people were hoping from Pat last season, right? And this is sort of the year where it's like, hey, it's your, the last year of your rookie contract. It could get a, extension this offseason. We'll see if that ends up happening. But it's like, then you're going to be becoming a restricted free agent. So really hoping for a breakout year for Pat. I definitely think that this is going to be a super important year for him compared to the rest of the roster. Chuck, I'll get you out here.
Look at it this way.
Yeah.
Who's your backup for?
Well, I guess it depends on if Torrey Craig is going to start or if it's going to be Pat. But the backup forward, I guess if you're going to start Pat, would be Craig.
Okay. So your backup forward is Craig. And so you say to yourself, okay, in the lineup, the way this starting five, would you rather have Williams start, knowing that from an option standpoint, offensively, you got Zach, you got DeMar, you got Vooch. Okay. So, and I mean, that's why I think Javon Carter will start for the Bulls.
Yeah.
Because I think Coby with the second unit gets touches, and offensively, I think doesn't have the burden of saying, gosh, everyone wants to hear their name starting lineup, and you got, Gary Glitter and the music, and you got the PA guy and all that stuff. I get that. But you know what? That's all window dressing. The truth of the matter is, how do you fit in with the concept of your team? I think Coby is a great sixth man.
Yeah.
And you know what? He got paid, and he got paid because of his production and his potential, because he hasn't hit his ceiling. Right. But I think he's best suited for the second unit. So you say to yourself, Patrick Williams, where offensively, where does he fit in with the lineup of the Bulls, starting lineup? Right. Would you rather have him come off the bench? Well, if he comes off the bench, how many minutes is he going to play a game? Will he still play 30 plus? or what are we looking at? I think this is going to be a very interesting year for Pat.
Do you think he will ultimately start? Do you think they'll have him come off the bench?
Here's my take. I think he is so skilled that he's got to start.
Right.
I mean, there are so many wonderful players in this league at the 4 or 5 spot now with teams. I mean, you can really, if you want to do this, you can forget about 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. In my generation, scouts would say he's a 2, he's a 3, he's a 1.
Right.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
So, but one thing is when you see a team coming to town, you say to yourself, okay, you know what? That guy is guarding, Patrick Williams is guarding Giannis. Patrick Williams has got Tatum or something because he's going to guard the best player, 6, 7 and up.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think you got to start him. But again, we'll see how this plays out. But I do think that with a player that good, potentially, and on both sides of the floor, and then they're going to have to figure out how he winds up on the offensive side.
Yeah, and I think you said like a lot of it depends on if he makes that leap, right? If he's showing massive progress, then he's obviously got to start. Chuck, I'll get you out of here on this. You recently celebrated passing your 2000 career game called a few months back, actually. So it's actually more than that now, but big congrats on that, by the way. Very few broadcasters can say they've called that many games in their career. What was the most memorable game that you called of those 2,000 plus games? And I promise I won't be offended if it's not a Bulls game.
It's not a Bulls game. It was Kobe's 81.
I had a feeling it would be.
I mean, listen, just being a part of that and seeing it where we were located at the time, then known as Staples. So the visiting TV broadcast setup was, really near center court. Yeah. And I saw every point. I mean, the Raptors threw everything at them. I mean, they had Mike James, Chris Bosh, Matt Bonner, Jalen Rose, Mo Peterson. I mean, everybody was Joey Graham. They were trying to guard him and they couldn't stop. And I mean, Sam Mitchell threw everything at him, everything. And everyone in LA knew he was going to get the ball.
Right.
And he was just, he was phenomenal. And so that, of all the games I've done, and I mean, I did Donovan Mitchell's 71.
I was going to say, you also did that one too. Yeah.
And I did Vince Carter and Paul Pierce's first NBA game. I saw the Iverson-Carter matchup in the playoffs where both players went off for 50. The 7-game series with Boston and the Bulls. Rookie year for Rose. I mean, when that was and Noah stealing the ball in the slam, which is an iconic moment. Yeah. And then the heartbreaking series with the Bulls and the Cavs where LeBron pops out in the corner and hits it. I mean, that still blows my mind how we kind of just, lost that blink of an eye where Dellavedova's on the inbounds and boom. And then, James hits the shot. I mean, you could go right down the list of unbelievable games, where Rose went down with the ACL late in game 1 against Philly. All these things come into play, but honestly, the 81 game was phenomenal.
What's it like as a visiting broadcaster, right? It's hard to kind of get excited when you're seeing that from the opposing team. I imagine when it's something like that, you just can't help but just be.
No, you can't, because I mean, you're watching a man score 81 points, second highest in the history of the NBA, and the way he did it, where the Lakers were down by like 18 points in the game, and they were going through the motions. And you can look at their roster on that club. I mean, they had Chris Mim, they had Smoosh Parker.
Yeah, they weren't a good team.
No, and and he said, "Hey, you know what?" And he came up with a midcourt steal in the third quarter streaked to the rim, slammed it. Crowd gets back into this game. It's a Sunday night in LA, and Coby went off.
Yeah.
And Coby's agent at the time, Rob Pelinka, the GM of the Lakers,
right,
was my broadcast partner.
Yeah.
At Michigan games.
Yeah.
And so he had introduced me to Coby long before that season.
Mm-hmm.
So when I would see Coby, he would always make time, and I wrote this in my book, that he would always make time when he would see me, come aside. We'd talk for about 5 minutes about things, about life, about, about Chicago, about Toronto, what's the difference between the two,
right.
How's your family transitioning from, Canada to the US? I mean, stuff like that. And it wasn't long. It wasn't 10, 15 minutes,
Sure.
but it was probably a little over 5 minutes or so. And so his last game he played in Chicago at the United Center, I spoke to him, and I'll never forget this. He said, keep doing this as long as you can, because he said, this is a great sport.
Yeah.
And it was time for him. He was done. He knew he was done.
Right.
It was going to be done, and he wanted to move on to other things. I mean, he won an Oscar.
Yeah.
His second chapter of the book of life, that he was going to embrace life with his family. He loved his family, and he had so many gifts other than just bouncing a basketball. But I encourage, and this was a great podcast, so I'm glad you invited me on. I encourage people, I don't know if it's still available on ESPN Plus, but Coby broke down players' games.
Yeah, it is, and it's great. I love it. Yeah.
I mean, and I told him this, and I told him this, after I saw him in basketball, how he managed to break down players. And then, like, literally, okay, do you see how he's walking the ball up? He needs to push the ball over the timeline earlier for this team to get into their sets. Then he would look at a player and he would say, you know what? He doesn't come off the screen hard enough. He says, you got to sell it. Just don't, act like, and I mean, it was great. And I mean, so visiting players, opposing players wanted him to break down their games.
Yeah.
He can't, because who else would, and I'll tell you what, his basketball IQ was off the charts.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, LeBron, I know people like LeBron, don't like LeBron, whatever. Some he probably brings on himself, but a lot of times, if his basketball IQ, and for that matter, his intelligence, period. But if you spend any time with LeBron where he talks about a player, it's mind blowing.
And I think for Coby, he would have made such a good coach, an NBA coach. Yeah, had he gone that direction.
You know what? I don't think I'll say this. I think the issue is that I think he would have been so frustrated with
that's probably true.
He would have. I mean, the fact that with players, or that they don't want it bad enough, or they're not coming in the gym. I think that all the volume of disappointment would have reached a level, and I think that's why with LeBron, I'll tell you what, I do believe that LeBron will be an owner in this league. There's no question he's going to be an owner, and it's going to be interesting to see how LeBron handles the ownership role when he hires a GM, and will he allow a GM to be a GM and a coach to be a coach, because he has such a great passion. Mm-hmm. And he'll be a fabulous owner. He'll be an unbelievable person to, have somebody come into his office. But when he sees something, or when the GM comes to him and says, hey, I got a deal on the table. I mean, will he say, no? Or will he say, hey, you know what? This is your deal.
Right.
This is your, you want this, you're going to be evaluated, and boom.
Which I think is something Michael Jordan has really struggled with, right? Being one of the Hornets, kind of not really willing to relinquish control.
Or maybe Michael at the end of his run decided, okay, like I'm hiring you, Mitch. You
Right.
do your thing, and boom, and I'll watch. And if I got a suggestion to make, actually, the irony of the Kobe LeBron thing, I did LeBron's first 50-point game.
Oh, no way. Okay.
It was against Toronto, and it was his first 50-point game. Obviously, he's had many more after that, but yeah, basketball, the basketball planet, certainly I'm very, very appreciative of
Yeah.
what I've experienced, not only at that, but at the collegiate level as well.
Absolutely. Well, Chuck, as always, very much appreciate you making the time.
Thank
You're a man of the
you.
people, meeting with, everyday fans like myself. Keep up the
No,
great
you're
work and
great.
everything.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
No, I appreciate it. But yeah, keep up the great work and everything you do, and hope to see you in person sometime next season.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Chuck.